What's going on, everybody? This is Sanyal, creative entrepreneur and investor, and I am on the Unsigned podcast right now. You guys can find me at Ani Hustles. Let's get into it.
Ani, thank you, man. Appreciate you making the time. You got a lot going on these days, wearing many hats, and we've been trying to make this happen for the last couple of months. So glad you could find a little time in the schedule, man.
I'm grateful, man. Thank you for the patience and everything in its own time, right? I think that's what we learned over these past 12 months.
Yeah, seriously. So appreciate it. Before we get into things, I want to make sure that we're talking about important matters up top. So I like to, start everything off with a discussion around, the Black Lives Matter movement. It's something that I think, especially being a white person in hip hop and in music, it's my job, to make sure that that conversation is continued to be had. So yeah, man, I want to start right there. What are some of the things that you and your team are doing to kind of help combat systemic racism, kind of on the day-to-day on the individual level? I want to start there, then kind of curious your broader thoughts on, some things that, so whether it's some people or some brands that you think have been doing a good idea to continue talking about this. And then, please feel free to shout out any resources or anything that you pay attention to. I think it's important that we share credible sources. You know what I mean? And so,
100%.
more the merrier. You're somebody that's in it every day and paying attention to this. So, anything that you can kind of share around everything, would love to get your insights.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you starting this off. I mean, I think, for me, I owe so much to Black culture and Black people for embracing and accepting me for who I was during, a time where, white America or just America in general didn't really want to know what brown people were, what that was. And, being in the hip hop industry, I mean, hip hop is a Black art form, so I am always a guest in this art form, and that's something that's top of mind for me all the time. And I think that, I mean, our country is just a very sad excuse for a progressive country when it comes to race relations. I think that there's no excuse for the way we treat Black people in this country. There's no rationale for the level of police brutality. I mean, there's no rhyme or reason for this. It's completely unacceptable. And the saddest part to me is how ready America is to consume Black culture. How excited we are to support athletes and rappers and entertainers, and at the same time can't stand up for them or advocate for them when it's time to push real change forward. From voter disenfranchisement to the education system to housing. I mean, everything is just it's structurally set up to deny Black people access at the same level that other races have in this country. And I think that is, it's heartbreaking and it's extremely frustrating. I think for myself, one thing I realized at an early age was, capital and allocating your own resources and money to things is the only way out in this country. Unfortunately, I have this quote, America only respects violence and money, right? Those are the only two ways you can really make a point in this country. And I'm not the most violent person, so for me it had to be through capital. And I think now I'm in a position where I'm able to control a lot of different assets. What I mean by that is I'm in real estate. I own companies where I can employ people. I'm in a position where I teach and educate, and so those allow me to make certain decisions to impact people at a small scale, right? And hopefully that creates larger impact. But I know the ways that we're, actively contributing to kind of changing what is currently in the power structure. With our hiring practices, we're extremely cognizant about giving certain people opportunities, specifically, lower income people, minorities, people of color, in New York City and everywhere else. That's a big thing that I feel like if I can put money in your pocket, that's a step forward, right? Housing, I control a lot of real estate property, and making sure that we give people a chance to have a decent quality of life despite having made mistakes in the past. Past evictions, poor credit score, all these things are things that my team and I see every day. And we try to be as forgiving and as judicious as possible to give people second chances. And I know that, personally, I've done that for a handful of people, and I can only continue to do that. To drop in a bucket, but it's what I can do. We're active donors to the Bail Project, which is a pretty well-known organization that helps fund bail for a lot of like lower level offenses and misdemeanors and things like that. We have a T-shirt that we sell at my chai company, which says "Get Rich or Chai Trying," which is a slogan that originates from hip hop, and so we did donate a percentage of that, every month to the Bail Project. I run pre-COVID. I ran this for 4 years, free workshop, entrepreneurs workshop on a monthly basis for mainly of minorities of color, providing myself as a mentor and a resource for people to come, learn, get educated, ask questions, connect them to resources. There's been a lot of personal success stories on that side of people we've been able to affect. But yeah, that's a way that I make myself accessible, and lend whatever resources I have. So, these things are, and I'm speaking in the I because I'm trying to make it, relevant to the conversation. But I think if I had to leave this podcast, these listeners with any one thing, it's that I'm extremely aware of what I owe to Black culture, specifically to Black people in this country. And if there's anything that I can do on a daily basis to show my appreciation and my understanding of that, that's important to me. In terms of brands and companies that I think are doing a good job, I'm trying to think of things that are jumping,
Yeah, I was
off
gonna
the
say,
top.
and don't feel like pressured to say anything. I just
No, I mean,
conversation.
yeah, no, I'm really aware, like I think like what Jay-Z and Rock Nation and just kind of under his like vision have done. I think a lot of stuff they do is not publicly known, but I do know that Jay is very active, in helping individuals, and I think that's really important. I think LeBron is another person, just not only vocal, but I know LeBron does a lot behind the scenes, and those are two like pantheons, right? And I know there's a lot of smaller people doing work on a daily and weekly basis, so I want to acknowledge them too. But yeah, I feel like a lot of brands gave lip service to it, at the time when it was popular, and there's still some people who are committed to it. But I honestly don't judge brands or companies or individuals based on what they do or they don't, because we all know what's right, and if you're doing what's right, you don't have to prove a point to anybody. And that's kind of like my own personal ethos as well.
Well said, man, in like a number of different spots. But I feel the exact same way about owing Black culture a lot, because of what it's been able to give me, and it's only right to be able to give back and help out where you can. And yeah, I appreciate you answering that question about what it is that you guys are doing, because I think it's important that people know, yes, there are people like Jay-Z and LeBron that are doing things that can throw a lot of money at stuff, but there's also like the rest of us, right now, the smaller people that are doing things every day, no matter how small they are, just to make sure that we're keeping it top of mind, whether that's having conversations with older relatives that don't really understand what it is, and when they say something, having to correct them a little bit, or hiring people and helping to educate people. I think those things are extremely important, and because that does matter. We often like try and push it aside and say, well, somebody will throw a bunch of money at it and take care of it. And like,
Right.
that's not how this stuff changes. It's really about having conversations about, what you think are meaningless things, minute things about the way someone does something or the way someone looks at someone. Like, that shit matters, and it's important to call out and have a conversation so that people can learn when they make a mistake. And also, just kind of like you're saying there too at the end, I think it's important to give people that room and try and remove judgment and have empathy for why someone may feel the way that they do. Because if you can do that, that's when you can have the conversation, and hopefully you can find that common ground, to move forward in the right in the right way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you and I can have the utmost respect and our actions can align, but again, it's like we can't, we're not saviors and we can't do anything um, other than, like I said, be responsible for our own actions. And I think that um, the one thing I will say that I am happy to see in this country is the level of consciousness and the level of conversation that's happening now. I think it's definitely heightened, right? We live in a time where technology kind of like dulls us out and keeps us docile in a lot of ways, but that level of consciousness needs to keep rising. We need to keep kind of turning up the volume on all these things. And I'm hoping that in our lifetime, we get to see some real tangible change. But I mean, police probably killed somebody today, based on the statistics that I'm aware of. So, we say these things and sometimes it feels real hopeless, but yeah, I'm happy to, know that Black lives mattered in my life from a very young age, and, nothing really changed. We just kept doing what we've always been doing and trying to be equitable in the ways that we can control.
Definitely, man. Well said. And again, appreciate you, talking about that at the top here. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing it up, man. It's brilliant.
Definitely. So yeah, man, I want to shift gears a little bit, talk a little bit more about yourself and kind of get into the nitty gritty about this episode. But let's kind of start right at the beginning. Tell me a little bit more about yourself. Obviously, I've been following you on social media for the last couple of years, and we know a lot of the same people. But kind of curious the whole story too. Where you're from originally, and how did you get to where you're at today? You're CEO, manager, investor, into multiple businesses, real estate. If you don't mind, just kind of giving us the full rundown.
Yeah, man, my life story is a little crazy, but I want to keep it concise because I don't want to bore people. So I'm a product of two immigrant parents from India. I was born in Massachusetts. Spent a lot of my early childhood trying to figure out, who I was and what I was doing. I think growing up non-white in America in the 90s was a different experience. There wasn't really any context for what a brown kid is. Things like 9/11 and all of that didn't help, any of that. And I spent a lot of my, early years just trying to find that balance, that hybrid identity between what my family, put in front of me and what I was getting exposed to kind of outside the house. My parents took ultimate and just the craziest risks, for me to be born here and kind of continue on. And at that same time, they lived in a lot of fear their whole lives. They still do to an extent. And so I grew up in that environment of like, you're just fearful that something's going to go wrong and your family's going to fall apart, but you're also, exploring what this world and this country and all this brings. And hip hop music, was the first thing that helped me understand that my identity was something that could be told in a story format. Specifically, when I realized who Jay-Z was and what he was doing, and him being a person of color who owned something and was controlling something and, was able to leverage and create opportunities. I was like, oh, that's crazy, because before that, and I'm talking about I was probably 11, 12, 13 years old, before that, I didn't know what the end goal was. I was like, all right, do I have to just work a job or figure it out? And so long-winded way to say that hip hop music gave me a really like dynamic viewpoint into like how to tell stories and the importance of that. Rap music is so story driven, right? Once you get into it, you're like, oh my God, like, this is incredible. So fast forward to my teenage years, I started rapping. I would recruit my friends. We would throw little concerts at during lunchtime, like in the hallway, and battle, and just, my pants were out my ass and just acting, wild. And my parents were so confused because they were like, what is going on? Like, this is the last thing we expected when we moved to this country. But like I was writing raps, and for the first time, like that was a way to channel, like so many things that I was dealing with as a immigrant first generation kid. Um, I was born here, but I was conceived in India, so I feel like my soil is my roots are really from there, but you know felt very much like an immigrant kid. So fast forward to like my senior year in high school, my boy and I had basically put together like this album that he was producer, I was rapping, production was, and everything was horrible, but it was it existed. We printed up 700 hard copies. I think I sold like old PlayStation games and sneakers and worked a crazy job, put the money up, whatever, and we started doing these hand to hands. Senior year in college, we were already like checked out. We're just really like trying new things. And I remember I was like, I made my first $1,000, independently, myself through that experience. And I was like, oh my God, like this is insane. Like we were selling CDs. We started printing up T-shirts. We would have like little pop-up concerts like during lunchtime. Like that's where my mind was as a 17-year-old kid. Figured out how to get digital distribution on iTunes through CD Baby at that time. You had to mail your CD in, and we're on MySpace, trying to hack it. And that's where I come from, right? So when it comes to like understanding digital and community and content, I was doing that at 17, and so in a way, some of the things I do now are intuitive based on, X amount of years of experience. Fast forward, I went to New York for school. Again, I feel like it's similar to like a J. Cole story where I was just like, I used school as an excuse just to get to New York because I knew I needed to be in New York. In New York, I'm going to school, but I'm still very much involved in music. I get a chance to bring Wiz Khalifa to New York, to Webster Hall for the first time ever. He's never been to New York. This is flight school era. And I found this person who was going to invest for basically to pay Wiz's fee. I had a boy who was doing booking at Webster Hall, and he was like, Wizard Khalifa, like, who is this guy? What you talking about? I was like, bro, just trust me, I got you. And there I was, kind of like manager, artist, promoter, booking shows, raising capital, promoting it on social media. And I put my group, the group was called Green Street. So I put my group as the opener for Wiz. And it was like a Cinderella night. It was like all my friends from school came, but it was also like all the Wiz's fans came, and we had a live band, and it went crazy, and it just felt like surreal to be able to do that, and I don't think I was old enough to get into the club. I was either 20 or 21. Like it was one of those things where I just had the sheer willpower to do that. And that was really like a crystallizing experience for me, like to be like, damn, like when you harness digital and content and kind of know who's next and believe in your ability to do something, you could create some cool moments, and that really like kind of put my group, build some credibility for us. So anyway, moving through college, I graduate. I worked a job for, I kid you not, I worked a job for 2 weeks. I took a job because the only like thing I had to like close the loop for my parents. I worked some BS consulting job for 2 weeks, and I was like, oh, this is not who I am. Like I can't do it. And it was bizarre because I was getting paid, and that was also important to me, but I just could not do it. And I remember being 22 years old, living in Bushwick, Brooklyn with 2 roommates, having no idea how I'm going to pay my rent next month, and being like, let's figure this out, and being very devoted to music and kind of like trying to manage my group and also kind of break us and figure out what the life of an independent artist looked like. So that's my origin story. Is basically starting in independent music, both as an artist and like a manager, marketer. 3 months after I quit that job, I got invited to tour in Tokyo, Japan. Through, just we did a performance somewhere and someone caught wind of it, approached us. And I was like, man, I don't believe that. You're going to fly me to Tokyo and my boys, and you're going to pay us to perform music, tour in Tokyo for 2 weeks? I was like, nah. And then 3 months later, I was in Tokyo with my best friends, and we were like performing raps, and people were coming up to us and they knew our music. And I was 22, and that was the moment. And I only tell the story because that was a moment that I never had any more fear behind what I did as a creative person, as a independent business person. Growing up in an immigrant household, your parents want you to do what's safe. Rapping and being independent musician is not the wave. That's not even on their radar of things that could have happened, right? They were like, all right, worst case, he works like a retail job.
Yeah.
But I'm over here doing something crazy. And that Tokyo moment was like, oh, I'm way more powerful, than I think I am. And I have no reason to be scared because, I'm manifesting, but also my actions are really pushing my dream forward. Next 5 years was just like, the dream and nightmare of being an independent artist. Chasing down blog love, getting a lot of like great looks, double XL, The Break, we were on there, we were in the magazine, we did collaborations with Raekwon, we toured with Wiz, called us back out to tour. He was like, yo, I'll fuck with y'all, let's do this. And I was like, okay, that was crazy. Like we did so many crazy things. But it was also like such a difficult era, to make music.
That was the transition from the blog era to streaming. And that was like, it was just so gray, nobody knew what exactly to do.
That happened right, in front of us. And one story, I've never told the story because I don't do a lot of music related podcasts. I don't talk about the independent artist career as much, but in 2011, my group released an album called Endless Summer. It was released on DJ Booth, and it was kind of the first one that broke. OK Player, Two Dope Boys, we were everywhere.
Everybody.
And we were number 2 on the DJ Booth charts, which was like a big deal at that time. And the number 1 project was also called Endless Summer, and it was by a cat named G-Eazy. And Z had emailed me right before we launched, and he was like, are you sure you want to call your album this? We have a current album that's by this kid, G-Eazy. It's called Endless Summer. And I was like, man, we've been prepping this rollout and building Endless Summer for the past 6 months internally. We calling it Endless Summer. And we went from 2 to number 1, back to 2, back to 1 with G-Eazy the entire summer of 2011. And we both had the same project. I don't know if people were confused. I don't think so, because our numbers were through the roof. But that's just a really funny story to kind of put in context where I was as an artist.
Yeah, that was such a unique time, to try and figure all that stuff out. And it was like tough. Like so many people got lost in the shuffle. And I think it's like an industry thing, right? Because it was kind of cyclical, I guess. If you go back to 2006, 2007, it's like, what are we doing here? And that's the ringtone era, and shit really isn't there. And then blogs really catch on. 07, 08, 09, they're like the biggest. Drake comes out 2010, 2011, they're there. And then 12, 13, now Spotify is like in the States, but we're like, hey, what is this? And iTunes is still a thing, and it's just super confusing. And then you fast forward to like 2014, and then it's kind of like, all right, streaming is really here. And 15 and 16, streaming is here, and then 17, 18, and then we're here today where it is that. Now you have all these distributors in there. So yeah, it's easier now because the playing, from an independent standpoint to get your music out there, because technology has made everything so readily available. There's whatever, fucking 15, really qualified, strong distributors. So you get your, pick of the litter for what you want there, but it's still tough. The trick now is, how do you stand out amongst the noise? There's so much fucking noise because technology is there. So people, and again, unfortunately, music has been devalued by society and to a large extent. So it's like, what do you need to be doing? That's why you see these motherfuckers become like TikTok stars or YouTube stars, and then they start doing music because they're like, hey, I can do this. This is like easy to get into. It's cheap and it's fun and people fuck with it. But when you're coming from the other end, it's like, oh, I'm a musician. How do I compete with that? And I think that's kind of the that's the trick today, and the trick or the creative problem to solve.
For sure. No, I mean, yeah, you summarized it better than I could, but that is what I lived through. So yeah, I mean, I can just try to wrap my story up a little bit more concisely, but so 2011, 2012, that happens. I actually get invited to go score a Bollywood film in India. So now I'm getting paid to go fly out to India and be a part of this thing. And it just changed, again, my perspective on everything. In that summer of 2012, I was getting ready for a trip to India, and I went into a routine health checkup, and I find out that I had end-stage kidney failure, which is something that I knew that I was born with, like a kidney issue, but it had got to the point where I had 3 months to live, and like 3 months before I needed a transplant, like full on. And I told my doctor, I was like, I'm going to go to India. I don't care, what happens. I'm going to spend my month there, and I'm going to come back and I'm going to deal with it. And he was like, you're crazy. But I was just living that, I was living that far into my truth, where I was like, this is like my story. You think about it gave you the context of where I came from to even get to that point.
Right.
I was like, I must be onto something bigger, and he was just like, I don't know how you've been walking the last 12 months. Like, people with these kind of numbers are usually bedridden, their body doesn't work. And I was like, walking? I was like, I was just on tour in Japan 3 months ago. Like, I was going through, I just felt like where I was at wasn't by accident. All that to say, come back home, body breaks down, go on dialysis, and I spent the next like 6 to 8 months fighting for a kidney donor, a transplant. And my dad was actually the one that gave it to me in the end, because long story long, but he stepped up. And, I think a lot about that in my personal story, right? When you think about kind of unconditional love and what does family mean? Like, my family gave me life twice, like my mom gave me birth and my dad saved my life. So I recover from that 2012, kind of get back on my feet, 2012, 2013. And like you mentioned, the entire kind of world has changed for music. So now I'm here. I got a crazy story that I want to tell, but it's different, So again, came back out into the scene. We did like a debut with MTV, and we did a couple cool things and kind of built that story back up. But I was in a group, and as multiple personalities, multiple people, as you're getting older as men, it gets really tough, and those were my best friends at the time. And we, man, you already know, we went through war together, literally, picked each other up, fought for each other, cried on each other's shoulders, like made music with each other, had our most amazing highs and lows together. But I was 26 and I'm looking at my life and I'm like, this is not the way that I want things to go. I'm dead broke. I love music, but my parents just sacrificed this thing for me again. And my team is not pulling their weight. Like they're not going as hard as I am. And I'm like, what does this mean? So that was a really difficult time for me, where my entire identity was wrapped up as an artist and as a person in that world. And I had to divorce myself of that, step up, put my big boy pants on, so to speak. And I kind of walked away from music, and I made a decision to kind of move into more of the marketing and content and community building world that I had been doing the whole time, right? Just not getting paid for it.
Yep.
Fast forward, my brother and I started a creative agency, Green Room Creative. So we worked primarily with digital first businesses. Think about like peak direct to consumer era, helping brands tell their story online, customer acquisition, creating thumb stopping content that actually engages people. And through that, I was really able to transform my life and my family's life. So, did really well in the agency business first couple of years out, ended up taking a lot of that capital, reinvesting that into real estate. We ended up reinvesting that into our own cafe, restaurant concept, which we opened in 2019. That's been a Cinderella story before COVID came, but even then, we grew our business 400% during COVID. And so I've kind of transitioned into, a creative entrepreneur. I call myself someone that lives at the intersection of business and culture, because I know both those worlds really well. And I know that they don't speak to each other as well as they should. And that's really my, that's my expertise is digital storytelling, community building, and getting people to care, online. And throughout all of this, I didn't mention, but it's a big piece of my story. I get introduced to a young artist named Anik Khan, who is also Bengali, which is, where I'm from. And we met through a mutual friend. Him and I, similar storyline, the sons of our family trying to put everything on our back, tell our story and do it in a responsible way. And, we connected, we started working together here and there. I helped him with his social and kind of just helped him do certain things. And I was a big piece of his rollout for the Big Facts single and Era. I don't know if you remember kind of stuff we did around that, but I kind of came into his career at a time where I helped him transition from being like an artist to an icon in our community, so to speak, and really like helped productize certain things in his world so that he could eat, right? So he could earn money and create an ecosystem of businesses around him so that music was just not his sole revenue source because of how tough that is for independent artists. And that's where I am now. Kind of. That was a very convoluted intro, but we got here.
Yeah, no, man, you hit on a whole bunch of stuff and kind of teed up the next section of this. I was gonna ask for a personal story, but before we jumped into like the teaching section of things, but like you just crushed it, man. Like that's an amazing story, and yeah, man. Thank you for sharing. Like that's definitely deeply personal, and those are amazing stories, and like the stuff. Oh man, the family stuff is big now. I got a 2.5-year-old myself, so it's like thinking about legacy and what your parents will do for you, and thinking about what your parents did for us, and what you're gonna do for your kids. It's like that's amazing. That's the good shit that you want to like hold on to, and just like you said, you kind of have to step up to the plate. You know what I mean? Like you got a second shot at life. And you were like, yo, I can't waste this shit. Are you kidding me? Look what these people gave up for me. Like, oh my goodness. And so that's amazing that you see it that way too, man. So thank you for sharing.
Feel free to edit that down as you need to.
Oh, no, you're good, man. Like I'm going to keep that in there because that's super important. I think that's great context for the second part of it too, because it was like, hey, no, I was already in your shoes. You know what I mean? Like I was the artist who was plugging along during like the fucking hard time, right? That was like the recession of the music business. It was like, what the fuck are we gonna do here? Like, how do you make money? How do you roll an artist out? Like,
right.
I'm sure there was a bunch of artists that broke during that time, a few, right? How many people really broke during that time? It was fucking tough. Labels didn't know where to spend their money. Where are you gonna invest? You're like, yeah, you need a social presence. Yes, great. But like social media wasn't even where it is today.
It wasn't mature enough to even create
like,
revenue.
Put all your shit in that. Exactly. So it was like, what do you do? And you kind of just had to wait for these things to kind of catch up, the business to catch up to the technology. And now we're kind of here. And so,
yeah,
man.
All right, let's get into the music section of it. Let's
absolutely, man. Well, that's perfect. So I'm going to start right at the top. Some insights, from the managerial side of things. What do you think a manager should be doing to help an artist brand? Where should their focus be? In 2020, coming out of a pandemic.
I think
that's a loaded question. Right? It's fucking harsh, right? Like, hey, predict the future from something that's never happened. But that's what we do here.
You're good, man. I think a manager's job today is really getting an artist to first of all, have a concise story and understand the elements of that story. One thing that I make all the artists that I work with do is I ask them, give me 3 pillars of your story, 3 things in your life that are consistent that you stand on. And you should be creating content around those pillars. And so what happens is you start to be known for certain things. And when you really like create identity around certain pillars, the people who also identify with those things, they become attracted to you and you start building a tribe. And that's the number one thing that is most important, I think, from a brand side is like, managers have to not only help artists develop the story, but kind of do it themselves, create the content to further that story and kind of push it out more. And then also understanding kind of who they're attracting as their tribe and then feeding into that. Sometimes an artist will be like, well, I don't need to, attract any more like young dudes. Like I already got too many of those. Like I want to, I want like new fans. Like I want women to hear my music, or I want a different, segment of artists, segment of fans. And that's another tricky balance of feeding your core, but also expanding and making sure you're paying attention to, growing your fan base. But that's kind of how I would break that one down: is storytelling, content, and community.
Well said. Nice and concise. Those are the things that just build and feed into everything else. I think that's a great kind of baseline and a foundation for this next question too. One of the biggest hurdles starting out is obviously funding, right? Not having any money. But as we kind of talked in the beginning of this conversation, oh man, if we knew what we know now back at like 18, how would we have done things? So I kind of want to, I want to ask you that question. What are your suggestions for artists who are super young? Is it you posted something a couple of weeks ago on socials that I thought was dope. It was like, people say follow your passions. That's probably not a great idea. You should follow your talents, because that's what will get you paid. So I kind of want to merge these two questions together. What would your suggestions be for someone who's young, just starting out? Is it to follow your talents and build up or create passive income, and create some other revenue streams so that you have financial freedom, and then that frees up some of your time? Or, is it to follow your passions and try and do both, for an artist?
Yeah, I mean, the one problem that I think I've dedicated my entire life to solving is like this idea that artists can't be financially well off, right? You grow up, your parents want you to be creative. You get older and they're like, please don't, be a real creative, because we don't know if you're ever going to make money. And you're like, but art is, but art moves the world, right? I mean, music, books, poetry, literature, visual. I mean, these things move us. And so my whole, thesis is like helping artists monetize and create, financial vehicles so that they can continue to do that. As for your question, I think when you're really young, we have a tendency to want to just get out there and share what we're doing with the world. And, we're trying to blow up overnight. I think there's a lot of value in like honing your skills early on and maybe just being a little bit under the radar while you're also stacking up funds, doing the easiest thing that you can do in exchange, in time in exchange for money, right? If that means that you are stocking books at a library, but you're getting paid 12 an hour, go ahead, do that. That means if you're, unreasonably good at, I don't know, golf, and you want to teach golf lessons and you're getting paid 30 an hour, do that. Stack your money up and reinvest it into your art. But I think the thing to do early on is not to make a splash when you're 17 or whatever. Is really about put out your product, but invest in yourself. And to invest in yourself, you're going to need a little bit of bread, right? And whether you get that legally or illegally, or if you got people in your family that can hold it down or whatever it is, those open up other options for you, right? But I don't think that it's possible to move the needle nowadays without having some type of financial part of that equation. And that might mean shooting dope visuals and investing in your own content. That might mean, hiring somebody on social media just to help you reach more accounts. I'm not saying you gotta, have $100,000 to roll an album out. Just really just micro investments in your own brand and your own, business, so that it can push you forward. So I really think when you're young, it's like a combination of honing your skills and building up some type of bankroll. And then if you're good, that's one thing about music, is if you're good, the streets are going to let you know, right? Whether it's your friends of friends, or your the local open mic night that you're at, or whatever it is, like you're going to feel it. And at that point you have to jump off. And I encourage everyone to jump off, because then your passion is your talent, right? But if it's just kind of like, oh, I'm gonna pursue my passion, I think a lot of people get stuck in that. And what happens is then you're 27, you look up and you've pursued your passion for 10 years and you got no bread. And now you can't affect your own life. You can't affect your friend's life. You can't hold your family down. And that's a really difficult place to end up in. So I think it's doing a hybrid. And the reason that's so hard is because it's so hard. It's so hard to be creative and also cover your bases. But I think that's the smartest way.
Yeah, well said. and that's why I like that question, and I'm glad you hit on that. That was the thing that was going through my head, is like, it's tough. Like either way, no matter, no, it doesn't matter which way you slice it. This shit is going to be hard. Even if you go all in, it's still fucking hard because you don't have the money, you don't have the resource, you don't have the skills yet. When you're just starting out, you're not as good. There's very few people that are fucking Nas when they're fucking 18, 19, 20 years old. Drake, you know what I mean?
Right.
It's rare. Okay, so it's better to think of it the other way, and like, know that that's what you want to do, but have the plan to actually get there, to be like, hey, I'm going to work this job because I can get this money, and I'm going to take this money and this is what I'm going to buy with it. And this is going to help big it up, not just buying beats or just buying studio time, because that stuff is so cheap now. It's like, how do you build the audience? How do you build that business to get people to pay attention to you? And just like you said, it's like hiring a social media manager who's popping, who's not buying you fake bots, who can like do that.
Right.
Now your message is getting out and you're building up that. Again, great segue into this next question, which is the community piece. You touched on it before about, kind of the pillars, right, of how an artist should be, or a manager should be helping an artist. And one of them was, kind of creating content and going after and starting to build that tribe. Are there any, tent pole ideas that you have for building that? Like, hey, this is the thing that everyone kind of does from a community standpoint. That's first part of the question. And the second part of the question is, what do you think the best way is to achieve that? Creating a dope email list, socials, something else, a combination of everything?
Yeah, let's get tactical. So I think that the community piece is something we hear a lot, right? But I really would love to break it down. So I think one thing that artists have to realize is that when you make music, that is one of the things that you're offering people, right? It's your actual art. But I think it's important to offer something else in addition to that. You gotta have something else that you're bringing to the table. And what I mean by that is, like, an artist like Nipsey Hussle, for example, he offered us great music, but he also gave us a lot of other gems and a lot of other knowledge about how to be independent, or how to, reinvent the business model. He gave you hope if you were kind of in that world, right? An artist like Wiz Khalifa, he gives you escapism, right? You kind of like just, you're Taylor Gang, you're in a different world, and you're having a good time. So that's where I think the community piece needs to be thought about. Is an artist needs to be thinking about what else they can provide their fans outside of just their music, right? And if that's just a vibe and a feeling and all those things, that's great. But you really got to lean into that. And what I mean by that is, like, for example, artists that I manage, Anik Khan, he's a figurehead for immigrant culture in New York City. If you're a young brown or black kid and you're really trying to do things on your own terms, he's someone that you look up to, right? But that means that we have to go ahead and reinvest back into our community. What does that look like? We set up, free film screenings when we like premiere a documentary or something. And before, the press gets it, our community gets it, right? He curated a food festival where he brought in 5 immigrant-owned businesses into the biggest food stage with Infatuation in Queens, and gave people from the block, like a halal cart from the block was standing next to John and Vinny's, and so if you're a brown kid, you're like, oh my God, like that's a reference point. The label wanted us to put a billboard up in Times Square which said, like, big facts out now, Anik Khan, and we were like, nah, we want to say, damn, it feels good to be an immigrant, no other call to action, and just leave it like that. And we fought them on it. But what that billboard represented was like a moment of, joy and acknowledgement for people who are like, yeah, I'm an immigrant and I feel, wow, I do feel good. Like, I'm in the Trump era and the world's telling me that I'm not important, but that right there tells me I'm important. So it's about executing tactical things to give back to people in a small way, invite them to a private listening or a screening, or a big way, put up a billboard and represent for your people. And it's almost like always having dialogue with your community, right? So, like, Instagram Live and all those things are one way to go about it, but, like, what else is happening in your community on a daily basis, right? Like, can you pull up to a soup kitchen? Can you pull up to the basketball court? Can you, have a camera with you while you just give back to people? I think, again, Nip, prime example. Like, Nipsey was a multimillionaire living in the same hood that he grew up in, but if you live in Crenshaw, you see Nip all the time. He was really from that, and I think that's why his passing was so felt by so many people, because we all knew he really was about what he talked about, and I think artists have to make that similar dedication to their community. But yeah, other tactical things you can do. Try to organize using your credibility or your level of whatever, stardom, to organize things in your community and bring attention to things in your community. Basketball drives, donations, things like that. What can you do to really empower people? Give people value outside of music, right? So Anik's about to we're rolling out his album in the summer. And I want to give fans the ability to ride in his, 94 190E Mercedes, vintage Benz, and hear the album with him for the first time before it goes to press, before it goes out there. And just like, it's like the J. Cole method in a way, where you just focus on micro engagements that lead to bigger moments. The last thing I'll say is the data piece. So when I was, an independent artist and running that operation, myself, we used to keep an Excel sheet with all of our core fans based on their social media handle. And we would know this by people that always share our music or always DM us or whatever. And we would write down their handle. We would DM them like, hey, what's your name? Thanks so much for sharing. And we would write their names down, what city they were from. If we knew when their birthday was, we would write that down. And I remember, as a unit, we would mail flowers to somebody on their graduation, because we would know, our fan lives in Chicago and she's graduating, and we want to, we would send, someone a get well card. All these things we did as artists to build that community. And that's a very granular way to do it, right? And now technology exists through Superphone and Community and all these other apps that allow you to do that at scale. But to me, the artists that live forever are the ones that take that type of approach with their music and with their fan base.
Yeah, I think it needs to start that granular, because you need to be able to connect with those 2 or 3 people and see what really hits. Because too often we want to go to scale immediately, because we're like, I want to be rich and famous and big. And it's like, yeah, but the goal shouldn't be just to get there. The goal should be to be there forever. You know what I mean? And to operate at that high level and have that sustainability. The only way you get there is by doing those little tiny things that you think don't matter. But in actuality, that's like building the fabric of who you are as a person and sharing your story with the world. You should be using social media to share that story, to be like, hey, look what you should be doing in your community too. Or, if you're fucking with me, like, sign up for my newsletter because I'm giving news about this specific topic or whatever. I think that's extremely important. And I think the email piece is something that's like super missed out within the hip hop world. Like, especially they're just like, what are the Spotify numbers? When it's like, get on that email list. And the best way to do that is to like find some additional value. Like, everybody's like, I want to send people a t-shirt. I want them to buy a t-shirt. How about you take a page out of Tech's, playbook and come over here and offer some value before you ask them to give you, their money and their time with the music too. So now you're asking 2 things and you ain't even giving them I'm giving them all that music, but are you really doing that? Or are you doing that, selfishly saying, listen to my shit because it's good? So
100%. Yeah. And you touched on it too. I mean, I think 2 things that I just want to say quickly is it's a similar method to how we approach in the startup world, where you have to scale the unscalable interaction, right? You have to do the unscalable to figure out how to scale it. And I think artists kind of hate doing that, because they're like, man, I just want to drop and be good. But it's like, nah, the real work is there. And the second piece is, to your point about email lists, it's funny how like, the music business, I mean, the technology available to independent artists is still not there. But I think it's starting to mature, right? And we're starting to see, people using text, SMS, kind of direct messaging, and we're starting to see artists do a couple more things. But I think we're slowly reaching a point where technology will catch up to meet the needs of independent artists. And then you have, your social media list, your Facebook ads are pixeled. You have your direct to consumer kind of like community messaging app. And I think that's where I think the future is. And I've been listening to a lot of like podcasts and just industry things. I mean, a lot of people are claiming that artists are going to need their own CTOs, right, going forward, and I think that's real. And I think any artist that's resistant to technology right now is at a disadvantage.
Yeah, agreed. It's again, this is not easy. Like that. This is fucking hard, and but there's riches in the reaches in the niches, as they say. So go deep before you go wide.
Facts.
Yeah. So I want to talk about again. We kind of, I guess I'm doing a great job in my line of questioning. I didn't plan it out this ill, but it's coming across this way. But we were talking about how hard it is, all the different things that artists need to kind of manage. Do you think it's important for the artist to kind of fully understand, the music business, all the angles, or should they focus on the creative and leave a little bit more of the overall business tactics and strategy to a manager?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that's something that happens progressively in steps. So I think that initially an artist should be doing whatever they need to do to get hot. I think that's the most important thing, because if this artist's not hot, ain't no manager necessary, right? There's nothing to manage. So I think that initially I really
It's a
encourage
great
everyone I
point.
work with.
Sorry to jump in. That's a great point, because everyone's like, yo, I just need the manager. When you're a kid, you're just like, yo, I just need the manager, or I just need the lawyer because my shit's hot. And it's like, no, how about you build up your own leverage by just making your shit hot, and then
Right.
you'll get the pick of the litter.
Right. And a lot of managers, established managers will tell you, like, I'm not touching the artist unless he's already making money, because, but artists never seem to understand that part of the equation, and that's okay. They're artists for a reason. But I think that back to your original question, I think that artists should focus on, getting hot and just being creative and feeling somewhat unburdened from the business side of it initially. I think as your career progresses, you must, understand what's happening on the business side. I think, ownership is like this really big kind of like buzzword that gets thrown around, right? This idea of like artists want to, own your masters and own your publishing. I don't know if too many artists know what that means, right? And a lot of independent artists, yes, I mean, if you know what I'm about and you know what I represent, I'm 100% an advocate for ownership. That's, literally what I believe in. But if you own 100% of your masters and you don't know how to extract revenue from it, it
doesn't mean shit.
means nothing, right?
Yeah.
And if you own 100% of your publishing, but you can't get a sync for your life, or you can't, get any kind of looks, then you're not doing yourself, any type of benefit from that. And I think that independent artists need to understand that ownership is a flexible concept. It's not what it was 20 years ago, 10 years ago. It's completely changed. Ownership is flexible. Ownership is, it can be attained over time. It can be bought back. It can be, there's a lot of different ways that ownership works. And if you're in a position to get a bag in exchange for temporarily, signing over your ownership or leasing your ownership, and that money could then transform your financial picture to where you can invest in assets, or you can, create other streams of income to support yourself as an artist. That's something that everyone really needs to consider. I work with majority independent artists, majority of artists who are like, yeah, we want to own everything we do. And I respect that so much, because that's how I treat all of my businesses, right? Real estate, cafes, agencies, everything I've done, putting my own money and time into the game. So I understand that. But I think with entertainment, it's different. And you got to strike when you're hot. You got to make sure you're able to use the capital that you make from that to create other forms of income. And you need to understand that ownership is flexible.
Well said. The owner, the me being independent and owning everything and tooting that horn, fuck the majors, is just like, you don't, that's just not even how you should be thinking about it. You need to keep an open mind and understand that you can earn those things back. It's about understanding the business so you can understand what you're giving up and how to actually get it back, how to structure a deal to say, cool, I'll give up these rights for a certain period of time, but if we do X, Y, and Z, I'm gonna get that back. I'm going to get it back after this period of time, or bake those other
Right.
things into the deal. And if you're hot enough, you're going to get the deal that you want. So it's about, and then just like you said, taking that money and understanding like, oh shit, let me take these 6 figures and go put it into something else that's going to make money right away. Not let me go buy a bunch of shit. Let me go buy cars and houses, and houses might not be a bad idea, but cars or clothes or jewelry, because it's depreciating. It's not going to be there. You got to be able to take that money and put it back into it. And so well said. I want to just get your take on where, we talked a lot about kind of in bits and pieces about where the industry is or maybe where it's going, but want to kind of put a button on there, put a bow on things here. Where do you see the future of the music business going? Do you think it's do you think it's feasible for artists to build their own subscription services and their own models based on the things that they put out into the world? And, if so, what sort of impact do you think that'll have on, DSPs?
Yeah, I mean, I think the music business is always victim to inertia, right? Things that are kind of the momentum from what's happening in the mainstream kind of dictates what happens for a long time, right? I mean, think about how long it took us to stop buying CDs and move to streaming. And so now we're in this world where, streaming is predominant and artists are losing their ability to stay in touch with their fans and monetize that in a lot of ways. At the same time, technology, I think, is going to continue to empower the artist. I think the future of independent music and just kind of music business at large, I'm really looking for a big artist to go fully and truly independent and kind of shake up and break that paradigm. I think Chance the Rapper was, one example for a while, at least initially. But I think that it's going to take someone who doesn't need to be independent to kind of be like, no, I'm going to do this my way and figure it out, and really treat that almost like a startup company. Have a operations team, a tech team, merch team, and build it out that way. I think there's some real value in that. I think that, with COVID and all that, I do think there's a lot of pent up demand for experience, after all of the dust settles here. And I think the next 3 to 5 years are going to be really driven by experience, not only live shows and things like that, but how do you bring that intimate kind of connection back to the artist fan relationship? I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity there. It's like, I think J. Cole was driving around on a bus, popping up at random people's homes and playing Forest Hill Drives, like right before his project came out years ago. Like, I think that type of energy comes back into the fold. And I think artists can really maintain a close relationship with their fans by doing some cool stuff there. Do I think the label model still exists? Yes. But I do think that slowly you're going to see a new funding model emerge for artists across the board. So the same way, a company raises seed rounds and Series A's and kind of goes public, I think there's going to be an opportunity for artists to do the same thing in terms of like being able to raise capital from other places than a record label and be in this like crazy, recoup situation where they're only seeing a percentage of what they earn. And even then, they have to earn up to a certain point to be in the black. I think all of that and like the funding model is going to change. I think it's going to take, someone to kind of figure out what that looks like. But that's the thing that I'm most excited about, is like this intersection of kind of startup capital, right? Artist funding and technology. And I think you're going to see, someone kind of break that model and really show us what's possible.
Yeah. Yeah. I think those tools are there. It's about them being in one spot. And then, the big financial companies that have been around for, hundreds of years, the JP Morgans, all the big banks being like, oh no, this is an actual asset class. And this is how, or just, just like you said, that venture capital money coming in and being like, oh no, we only back artists. Like I was reading something the other day talking about, how some of the big firm, the big venture capitalism firms are just capitalist firms are just they turn away projects because they have so much money. They're like, yo, we need something so big, so astronomically big.
Yep.
And to me, it's like, yeah, but why don't you take $100 million that you don't want to invest in some other company and start an entire fucking industry? You know what I mean? Like that's
Right.
for $100 million, you don't want to invest in some company because it's not enough for you. It's like, cool, but why didn't you just come over here and start like this new division of the music business? And I think there's people that are trying to do that, but maybe not in the exact way. They're investing into companies that are doing pieces of it, like
Right.
you know, United Masters is running around getting a bunch of funding, and they kind of offer some of these tools in one spot, but they, they got some other stuff going on too. So it's kind of, that there isn't one spot to do it. So yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
On your, sorry, I just wanted to make sure I got that note too. I wrote it down, just about the experience thing. I think the other thing that'll come back as well is those smaller shows. I think there's going to be so much pent up demand that the fans are really going to get, the best options. We're going to, I guarantee we're going to see some like amazing tours that we've never seen, because these booking agents need to get everybody out on the road. A bunch of people are doing albums, X, Y, and Z. So they're going to be putting these crazy pairings together. So you're going to get like Watch the Throne level tours, like all the time, because there's going to be so many people trying to go out. That said, I think one cool opportunity is to potentially go the other route and do those fucking dive bars. Like Bud Light was doing that a couple of years ago with, like, they did stuff with Post Malone and Lady Gaga, and they did the whole dive bar thing. I think that might be a cool idea if you take a really big artist and go there and either do free shows at some point, or you're doing these are $200 or $500 or $1,000 tickets, but there's only 200 people in here, and there's no secondary market. The shit ain't going on StubHub. It's like directly from my fucking Lady Gaga website straight to you. And you know what I mean? Like, you can't sell, because now we have the blockchain technology. There's got to be a way that they can't resell it, so it's with that person. And so, just like you said, I think there's going to be some really cool opportunities that pop up, or just cool experiences. And if the right artist can figure out how to put all that together, it might be a unique way to catch fire a little bit.
No, I think that's brilliant, and I completely agree. I think shows turn into experiences, which turn into higher level of personalization and kind of like that direct to fan thing. I think that's where we're going to see a lot of growth.
Yep. Well said. Were you going to say something else about the venture capitalist piece?
No, I was, and then I kind of lost my train of thought. No, I think the reason I think they don't do it is because a lot of them are just squares and they don't understand culture, sure. Right?
That's why they're not art. They're like, we don't buy art. They may buy a piece or two for themselves, but they're not.
Right. Right. And they all got more money than me, so they can be mad at me. But ultimately, like, I think creating something that moves people is, it just stands the test of time. That buying a underwear company can't really do. And I know that's the type of stuff that venture capital loves. No, I was going to add something, but I can't remember. So let's keep it pushing.
But it is interesting, because it's like what they care about are the numbers, and they look at like the growth, and now artists actually have the tools to show that. And if you get, I think but it's weird, because it's like they, an artist, say they get hot on TikTok, right? And they blow up and they're having a moment. The moment is so quick and so short-lived that they don't really have a lot of the data to go and show to somebody, or they have it and they don't know how to, articulate it, or it hasn't been for an extended period of time. But some of these companies that these motherfuckers are investing in, it's like, hey, we're not going to turn a profit for like 10 years, but give us $5 billion. It's like, guys, what the fuck? Just turn this around. Like, this musician who's popping, they just need some bread. They don't need 5 billion. They need like 100,000. You know what I mean? And if you spread that across the best, I think that's, you guys like empower the people because you guys have this fucking money. It's like,
Right.
that's where I think you can see some great art come, because that's one of the sad things. We're talking back to the first question we had about funding, is like, well, fuckers, they can't afford to not make money. So then, unfortunately we lose great artists because they got to go get a regular fucking job.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's
Yeah.
because they didn't have the data, and they couldn't put it together in a fucking pitch
Yeah.
deck for you, and yada yada yada. But
Right. And I think where you are seeing things change, this is what I was going to say earlier, is you are seeing some private equity funds pop up that just
right.
are centered on buying music catalogs, and that I think
Yeah.
is a world where there's a little bit more data, right? There's a little bit more kind of ability to track and monetize. And you're seeing some massive growth and activity on that side. This is random, but I do want to add this because you made a really good point about, well, we just talked about, artists raising money. I think if you're an independent artist, if you're, an early artist, I think that figuring out a way in which you raise X amount of money and then finding a way to pay those people back with interest or with a little bit, whatever, like if you can figure that out, I think there's a lot of worth in that. And I think that if you have a community or if you have people who are on your side, you'll be surprised at how far you can go. Meaning, you need to roll an album out. You need 10K to just kind of, package and do what you do. And you know that you're going to get booked for shows. You're going to make money from streaming. You know that you can sell merch. And those are ways you can return, that capital back to your quote unquote investors. And say you just graduated from school and you got, you're 25 and a couple of your boys are working decent jobs, making, decent money, and they really think you're the one. Well, can they put in that 5K check into your business, and can you find a way to create some type of vehicle to return that capital? I think that's something that hasn't really been figured out. And I think there's a lot of value in that. And I think if you're an artist, you don't need a massive technology or platform to figure that out. Just run it yourself and kind of figure out, how much do you make from shows now? How much can you make from merch? And figure out what you can pay back, to your quote unquote investors. And that's a great way to cut a bunch of corners and, actually have that amplification method for your music.
Yeah. I love that idea. And the other value piece I think that's in there that's often overlooked is that even if you fail at that, look what you learned during that entire process. You created a pitch deck, you showed all your analytics, and you went to the people and you raised the money. And yeah, it was only 5 or 10 grand, but like you still got something when there was nothing there. You created that. So now you have that skill and you understand what it takes to put together a business presentation. And then maybe you do better the next time, or maybe you help somebody else and you go and you do that. Because yeah, too often they're just like, oh, I failed and I missed. It's like, whoa, then you weren't paying attention to like those gems that are in there. And it's like, that didn't work, but you didn't fail. You just learned something. You learned that maybe 10 grand wasn't enough. And maybe you needed to get 25 or 50, and so how do you go and do that? And how do you show and how do you make that work and kind of work backwards from that? I think, yeah, that's something that's just really coming into consciousness because there's enough tools. But yeah, we need something that's a little bit more consolidated so it's in one spot. Because now when you're an independent, now it's almost like too much technology. You're inundated with shit and you're like, yo, where do I start? What the fuck do I do?
Correct.
It's tough. It's tough. But
really well said.
Appreciate it. So yeah, man, again, appreciate the time. We went way over, but thank you, man. Like it was a great conversation. Coming down to the end here. Yeah, what are you working on that you're super excited about? Where can people get at you? And yeah, we'll wrap up.
Yeah, I mean, right now, I'm working and focused on releasing Anik's album this year. We're doing a 2-part EP. This is all stuff that was ready to come out in 2020. We were on tour with Sanyal the week before the world shut down. So we've literally just been holding our breath since. So I'm really excited to kind of roll this out, tell his story, connect with fans and show people, how we do it. I think we've always brought a lot of independence and a lot of like that, radical streak to our releases. And I want to keep doing that. And obviously, I got my own projects always, but I'm always excited in like, how do you help artists and creators monetize what they love so much to do? And that's what I'm focused on. People can find me at Ani Hustles. That's real simple. ANIHUSTLES across every platform. I'm super approachable. It might take me a couple of weeks to get back to you because my life is a mess. But please, if you ever need like any, feedback or something, just reach out to me because I definitely want to be part of that community that I talk so much about.
Yeah, man. Appreciate it once again, man. And we'll definitely talk soon. Hopefully we can do another one at the end of the year and review how the album went and talk about some learnings.
I'd love that, man. I appreciate you for having me out.
Absolutely, man. We'll talk soon.
Yes, sir.